This is Saturn, girl. I'm freaking out, yo. Why?
Because a horrible dragon is about to devour the sun.
And what do I mean by that? I mean that on Monday, April 8th, we're going to have a total solar eclipse in the sign of the sun's exaltation, Aries. Exalted. Pfft. They just say that because they wish they were Leos. I'm kidding. I love Aries suns. I mean, I think they're exalted, especially when they make me their throne. Please. I'm super comfy. But seriously though, Aries suns need freedom and space. Otherwise, they may go to the store and never come back. I swear, they run on energy drinks and anger. I guess temper tantrums give you wings. But enough making fun of Aries. This video is about the solar eclipse. So I want to talk about what eclipses are, what they mean for us, and what they mean for you by doing your horoscopes for the occasion. So please watch all the way till the end. But first, let's look at the fun chart, shall we? So here's the moon, and we see it getting closer and closer to the sun, and then boom! We have the eclipse! Oh my goodness! I'm so scared! But what the f are eclipses anyway? Well, if you have a new moon or a full moon within 15 degrees or so of one of the lunar nodes, we necessarily have an eclipse. If it's a new moon, that means the moon is eclipsing the sun, and we therefore have a solar eclipse. If it's a full moon, that means the Earth is eclipsing the moon, and therefore we have a lunar eclipse. And you may be thinking, what the f are the lunar nodes? They're the points where the path of the moon intersects the imaginary path of the sun, or rather, the path of the Earth as it orbits the sun. In short, it's where the moon's orbit intersects the Earth's orbit. The north or ascending node is where the moon's orbit intersects the ecliptic, moving upwards towards celestial north. Remember that the ecliptic is the imaginary path that the sun takes around the Earth. Or at least that's how it looks from our vantage point. Of course, we know the sun does not orbit the Earth. Rather, the ecliptic is the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun. The south or descending node is where the moon's orbit intersects the Earth's, going downwards towards celestial south. The lunar nodes also precess, meaning they move around the zodiac. We call this lunar precession, which is the time it takes for the north node to return to the same place relative to the spring equinox. Or we can just say return to its same place in the zodiac. You see, the moon's orbit is tilted about 5 degrees relative to the Earth's. So its orbital axis precesses over time, and it moves in the opposite direction of the Earth's orbit, meaning clockwise. And a complete revolution of the nodes around the zodiac is what's called a draconic period. We'll explain where the draconic or dragon symbolism comes from in just a minute. But first, what do the nodes actually mean? Remember that in astrology, we're symbolically interpreting astronomical phenomena. In ancient astrology, the nodes were known as the eclipsing places because they were the points where sun, moon, and earth all align. Eclipses had an ominous quality in ancient societies. And this is where the draconic or dragon symbolism comes in. You see, eclipses appeared to ancient people as if a
Dragon were devouring the sun or the moon.
Therefore, in ancient astrology, the nodes indicated either an increase or decrease in the potency of either malefic or bad planets, or benefics or good planets. You can find a lot of this information in Demetra George's wonderful work, ancient astrology, theory and practice. In Vedic astrology, according to my girl Demetra George, the North Node was known as Rahu and represented a desire for increase and material acquisition. But the idea was that what you want may consume you, just like that fucking dragon. While the South Node was known as Ketu and had to do with release and surrender to emptiness. And therefore, it was associated with the spiritual path and liberation of the soul. In modern and evolutionary astrology, the North Node is the direction you're moving in for the rest of your life and the beginning of the next, as well as your destiny or what you have to cultivate. It sort of starts at the second nodal return, which happens in the late 30s, while the South Node represents the past, or past life, and its recapitulation during the first part of this life, where we are expressing and processing past qualities. So what do eclipses mean then? As I said earlier, ancient peoples typically saw these as ill omens. Hence all the dragon symbolism. They were also the primary omens used in ancient Mesopotamia, but they applied more to collective effects, like earthquakes, floods, or the death of a king. As you may know, new moons indicate new beginnings and the start of something. Therefore, solar eclipses are like big new beginnings or supercharged new moons. Full moons, on the other hand, are about endings, the culmination of a cycle, where we reap what we've sown. Therefore, lunar eclipses are like big endings to certain periods in our lives. We usually see the effects of an eclipse manifest over the following 6 months until we get to the next one. We also have about a 2-week period between a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse, which I think of as sort of a liminal space or gestation period, where we're closing off one chapter of life to anticipate the opening of a new one. The famous astrologer Chris Brennan, who I love, once tweeted out that eclipses bring both the best and the worst events of our lives. Thank you, Chris, for the pleasant thoughts. We also have a distinction between North Node eclipses and South Node eclipses. If the moon is within 10 to 12 degrees of the North Node, she is ascending towards celestial north and is increasing in her significations. This can feel exciting and dangerous. Whereas if the moon is about 10 to 12 degrees from the South Node, then she is descending and decreasing with her significations, which is like the surrender to the unknown, powerlessness, and allowing things. This solar eclipse is a North Node eclipse. In my own practice, I approach the whole eclipse cycle symbolically. During that draconic period of 18.6 years, the lunar nodes go through each pair of opposing signs in the zodiac. For example, right now the North Node is in Aries, while the South Node is in Libra. That means the eclipses will oscillate between these two signs, and therefore between two whole sign houses in your birth chart. Those two houses being highlighted here indicate what phase you are in within the greater cycle. To me, this greater cycle represents the maturation of consciousness. That is, growing more to more into what you essentially are. I liken each of these phases to a moon phase, and this gives us a hint as to how this cycle progresses for each of us. We begin the cycle with the 1st and 7th house phase. This is where the crisis begins. I think of it as the new moon phase. And by crisis, I mean we often have an existential crisis. We ask ourselves, who am I? What am I? What's the point of all this? What does it all mean? You see, the relationship to self is challenged. Of course, how we relate to ourselves has a lot to do with how we relate to other people. This phase can lead to breakups, wanting to be single, or even meeting a new partner. Next, we have the 12th and 6th house phase, which I call the integration phase, and it's similar to the first quarter moon. We face resistance and then withdraw to process or integrate the lessons and experiences of that previous phase into a new understanding of ourselves. Therefore, this is a time to crawl into your cocoon. You need time to change and develop, sort of like a caterpillar, a hungry caterpillar.
Hungry for flesh.
Then we have the 11th and 5th house phase, which I call the butterfly phase. And I liken it to the gibbous moon, which is my moon. This is like an emergence into the light of day after having been sealed in your cocoon. It's often a period of looking forward towards a goal or a plan. It usually indicates children and friends or people who help you. I generally think of this as a time of optimism where we learn to enjoy ourselves again, reconnect with others, and cultivate a vision of who and what we want to be. After that, we have the 10th and 4th house phase, which I call the culmination, and I liken it to a full moon. This is like the time of maturity, fruition, and manifestation, where we make things happen, or they will happen to us. We often face big changes in life direction, or in our home or private life. This is like the crescendo or the fulfillment of the crisis. People often move, change jobs, or completely change their life direction. Next, we have the 9th and 3rd house phase, which I call the phase of reflection, and I liken it to a disseminating or waning gibbous moon. This is the phase that I'm currently in. It's where we reflect on how we did and the implications of our actions and our understanding. We often see our beliefs change to suit these new understandings. This could include spiritual or political values and the subsequent desire to express them. Our new worldview comes from a reorientation of motive, why we do what we do. And we feel the pull to disseminate or communicate these new values. And finally, we have the 8th and 2nd house phase, which I call death and auditing. And I liken it to the balsamic or waning crescent moon, which is also called the dark moon, interestingly enough. This is a phase of the material results and consequences of the rest of the cycle. It's different from the culmination of the 10th and 4th house phase. You see, that one has to do with reaching maturity in adulthood, whereas this one is like death and letting go. We take stock of our material achievements and hopefully feel a mix of both satisfaction and discontent. We realize there's still a lot of progress that we could make, and we begin looking ahead to new goals and questioning ourselves and the understandings that we've cultivated throughout the previous cycle. And now our favorite time, where we're going to see how this cycle applies directly to you by doing your horoscopes. And the great thing about this is that you can keep referring back to this video over the next 6 months. Of course, we recently had a lunar eclipse in Libra, conjunct the South Node. The whole sign house that Libra represents for you in your birth chart will show you the area of life that's coming to a significant ending, while the one that Aries represents in your birth chart will show you the area of life that is beginning to accelerate and progress for you. Remember, we do these horoscopes for each rising sign, but if you don't know it, you can watch for your sun sign. Since this is about the oscillation of eclipses between two opposing signs, we're going to arrange these horoscopes in those pairs of signs. So we're going to start with Aries and Libra, our Aries and Libra homies. You see, this is the 1st and 7th house phase of self and partnerships. We see a combination of big changes to our appearance, our identities, how we relate to ourselves, and how we relate to others. For Aries rising specifically, you probably experienced a big change in your relationships, which leads to an existential crisis, where you perhaps feel adrift or insecure. But the positive side of this eclipse is that it propels you into a new experience of yourself. While for Libra risings, last October precipitated a new experience of yourself, which will dramatically change how you relate to others. You could even meet someone new or let go of a previous partner who doesn't align with your new understanding. But let's move on to Taurus and Scorpio rising. Our Taurus and Scorpio rising Hermes. This includes my partner, who's a Scorpio rising. And this is the 12th and 6th house phase of isolation and health. Here we see a combination of big changes in our mental and physical health, which are reflective of the previous existential changes. We feel the need for solitude in order to understand and integrate these changes. For Taurus risings specifically, this phase will highlight the need for withdrawal and processing after letting go of a health crisis or a cumbersome commitment. One of my mentors once said, tread lightly with few obligations. That's about lightening your life's load in order to achieve a greater clarity. Because the more things we hold on to, the harder it is to see what's really important. For Scorpio risings, though, this phase is about readjusting your lifestyle to accommodate big changes in your health after a period of seclusion. You could have to attend to a chronic illness, or on the flip side, readdress the various commitments that you've made and focus on those that best align with your new motives. But let's move on to Gemini and Sag rising. Our Gemini and Sag rising Hermes. This is the 11th and 5th house phase of optimism and enjoyment. I call it the butterfly phase, if you recall. This is where we come out of our cocoons and have an opportunity for new connections and greater enjoyment in our lives. Sometimes people even have children. Gemini risings will end up focusing on a new vision or a new circle of like-minded people, or perhaps new supporters after letting go of a hobby or an issue with children. You see, it's putting your new motives into practice. But Sag risings will need to use protection during this phase, even though I know most of you hate it. But this isn't just about pregnancy. It also represents finding pleasure in things again and being a sparkly butterfly after letting go of an idealistic endeavor of some sort, or perhaps leaving a circle of friends. But what about Cancer and Capricorn? Our Cancer and Capricorn rising Hermes. This is wonderful because this is the 10th and 4th house phase of maturity and manifestation. This includes your public and private life. Here we see a combination of internally and externally bringing new motives into manifestation after beginning to practice them in the previous phase. For Cancer risings, this will likely bring a change in life direction after the close of a living situation or a significant shakeup to your private life. You could also start a new job or begin preparing for a significant career change. For Capricorn risings, you may physically move, find a new place, or make big changes to where you currently live. You may also notice a big change in your private life, precipitated, of course, by letting go of your previous life direction. Either way, for both signs, this is where you recognize the fruits of your new motives, or what they bring you. But let us move on to our Leo and Aquarius rising Hermes. You see, this is the 9th and 3rd house phase of reflection, where we consider what kind of fruit we produced. That is, how well we did. Our beliefs and how we communicate them are highlighted here, and we often reevaluate our motives. For Leo rising specifically, though, this eclipse will bring changes in your values, spiritual, political, and philosophical. That is, after seeing that your previous ones don't hold up to scrutiny. Of course, this is often painful, but it leads to a greater understanding and a new worldview. For Aquarius rising, that's me. We are learning to communicate our new values after letting go of long-held beliefs. Our motives have been changing, and we openly critique old beliefs and values through our words and actions. I've cut off a lot of old beliefs that don't serve me anymore. Well, what about Virgo and Pisces? Are Virgo and Pisces rising Hermes? This is the 8th and 2nd house phase of final consequences, death, and letting go. This phase entails the physical results of our motives and consequently recognizing what needs to go and what no longer serves us. This may involve our material situations, as well as discontent with our present accomplishments, and looking ahead to a new mode of understanding. For Virgo risings, this is primarily about letting go after recognizing how they could have built back better. Pun intended. This is the time of death and discontent, where you start to consider a new way ahead. For Pisces risings, this is more about taking stock of the consequences of your motives, and where you consider how you could further simplify your life to make greater progress in the future. Well, I hope this was useful. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and comment below because I want to know what you think, and it helps me out with the algorithm. Please also click the bell when you subscribe so that you get notified when my new videos drop. And my videos are the best. Please also consider tipping me. It helps me keep making such wonderful content. And I'm very cute, and I'm very funny, and I know my stuff. You can tip through YouTube Super Thanks. There's a button below. Or you can tip directly to my Patreon or to my PayPal. All my links are below in the description. And if you can't tip, you can always watch all my videos all the way through, including the commercials. Then you don't have to send me money because advertisers will. I also do the best readings. It's science. You can book directly through my website, frankielynch.com, or contact me directly. And once again, all my info is down below in the description. But most importantly, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a spectacular, whatever it is you're having.